Gen friends, I'm Major Gauravari and you're watching the Chanakya Dialogues English. China sends a spy balloon over the United States of America and the US does nothing. Nothing. They do nothing. Because they can do nothing. Because they have been depending upon this China entire world. China will do stuff that you can't even imagine. Today, what America has done to Vietnam, what America has done to Gen friends, I'm Major Gauravari and you're watching the Chanakya Dialogues English. Like this video, subscribe to our channel and don't forget to press the bell icon. Now this news from China, President Xi Jinping, in an address to his military has gone all poetic and he said a few things that I'd like to share with you now. What he has said is worst case scenarios and the bottom line. So these are two words that he has repeated time and again in his speech and he said, you must prepare for the worst case scenarios, you must start thinking bottom line. And what is the bottom line? Enhanced national security challenges for China and enhanced capability of war fighting is what you must seek. So he says, the complexity and difficulty of the national security issues we now face have increased significantly. We must adhere to bottom line thinking and worst case scenario thinking. Get ready to undergo the major test of high winds and rough waves and even perilous stormy seas. Now, there are 2-3 things here which he is trying to say to his people, and this is not just for internal consumption. This is what he is telling to the rest of the world. And let me try and decipher for you why he's saying it, to which audience is he saying it to. I mean, who's he addressing this to? This high winds and bottom line and worst case scenarios and all that. Who's he talking to, by the way? This could have been a missive to the military. This could have been a letter to the military. This could have been said in an otherwise closed environment because China is a closed country and, they don't communicate very well with the outside world. But this was said on an open platform and this was covered by all the Chinese newspapers. Now, you might be thinking Xi Jinping is head of state. He's the boss of China. Obviously, every breath he takes will be covered by the national and international media. But that's not so, especially in China. What Xi Jinping wants covered is covered, what he does not want covered is not covered because he controls the national media and he controls the national narrative. So, let's understand one thing and let's, both you and I, come to an agreement that he wanted this thing to go out. He wanted this thing to be discussed. Now, this is step one. Having established that he wanted it out, now let's come to step two. For a very long time, China was at peace with the world. For a very long time. For 25-30 years, China said nothing. From the 80s to the 90s to the early 2000s, China said absolutely nothing. It was non-aggressive, it was quiet, and all the while, China was building its economy. 24/7, China was working to turbocharge its economy. The most populous nation on earth did everything, carried out radical reforms. And the Chinese economy's success, this economic superstardom, which I will admit China has, came at a very, very steep human cost. Rights of people were crushed. Though it claims to be a communist country, but unions don't work because you cannot raise your voice in China. So this ideal concept of union is there only in Western countries. In a capitalist society, the union will work far better than they do in a communist society like China. China worked. China did not come to the line of actual control to threaten India. For all these years, China was quiet. And during China's growing up years, I was on the line of actual control. I do the Golu series on the posted in Hindi and Chanakya Dialogues Hindi, and you must have seen, I've mentioned there, I was posted along the line of control. And we would see Chinese soldiers coming in, and we'd wave to them, and it was okay. It was absolutely fine. Here, you see a different China, and this China was always the original China. Belligerent, aggressive, hawkish, wolf-like. China adopted a policy of wait and watch till the time they got stronger, So like Sun Tzu says in The Art of War. So to quote Sun Tzu, that famous Chinese strategist and general and thinker and philosopher, he wrote the book called, The Art of War. And in The Art of War, he says, if the enemy advances, you retreat. And when the enemy retreats, you advance. This is exactly what China did. They followed that 2,500-year-old philosophy. And they quietly retreated and went about doing their business. Today, China is economically a powerhouse. It is a superpower. And now China is sort of making its military stronger. America has missed the bus. America did not realize. China took American money and grew right under the Chinese nose. And today the Americans admit that China is the greatest geostrategic and national security threat for the United States of America. America allowed this to happen. And America today is allowing it to happen again because of weak leadership. If you have to control China, you have to be aggressive with China. China is not a democracy. China does not understand politeness. China mistakes good behavior for weakness. China says that if you say that you're being nice, China will interpret that as you being harmless. And China will act accordingly. So when we were trying to be nice, China thought India was harmless. So it's only when we put 500,000 troops on the line of actual control that China woke up and said that, okay, these guys mean business. And that China stopped in its tracks. America has to do something like that, because when you have indecision, what is China doing today? China is building up its military at a blistering pace. It's spending hundreds of billions of dollars in modernizing its military. There will be a time after a decade or two when China will have an equal number. Okay, Chinese Navy is already the largest in the world, but it does not have the capabilities of the US Navy. It does not. It simply does not. But there will be a time when it will. China is getting the best of science from America. And there are Chinese Americans who are American citizens who are stealing American technology and sending it back to the motherland. Russians are doing likewise, and China is getting the latest technology from Russia. You know that helicopter which crashed, Navy SEAL Team 6, they came, the Navy SEALs, to get Osama bin Laden. One helicopter crashed. The Pakistanis conveniently picked up the debris and they sent it back to China to do research and development and reverse engineering. And the Chinese did that. That was a special stealth helicopter. It was a Black Hawk modification. And the Chinese did that. So this is what the Chinese are doing day in and day out. They're figuring how to beat China. And I can tell you one thing. Given all of America's faults, and America has been faulty, America has been involved in a lot of bloodshed, right? And I'm not carrying a brief for the United States of America. I've been one of the most vocal critics of the US. But I can tell you this. A country like China, if it ever, heaven forbid, has the position of the United States of America, the diplomatic, the financial clout, the institutional clout, China will disrupt this entire world. China will do stuff that you can't even imagine. Today, what America has done to Vietnam, what America has done to Iraq, what America has done to Afghanistan will seem like child's play to what China is capable of doing. China lacks the capability today, but China has the intention. When the Chinese intent and capability match, you will see disruptions on a global scale, which is why China must be stopped. And this is something that America is simply not understanding. And even if it's understanding, their president, Joe Biden, yesterday he fell down again. He's called Sleepy Joe. He goes off to sleep in the middle of meetings here. You need a guy who's more aggressive than China. You need a guy who's willing to go to war with China. I'm not saying go to war with China, who's willing to go to war with China. There is a difference between going to war and the Chinese believing that you're willing to go to war. Somebody who's willing to take kinetic action. China sends a spy balloon over the United States of America and the US does nothing. Nothing. They do nothing. Because they can do nothing. Because they have been depending upon China so much. They should have understood that in the end, your values don't match. China is not a democracy. China is a dictatorship. It is an autocracy. For all practical purposes, Xi Jinping is the emperor of China. I mean, you may not like the word, but he is the emperor of China. He's the boss. He calls the shots. He's the Supreme Court. He's the stock market. He's the government. He's everything rolled into one. So, what I'm trying to say is that America ignored the rise of China. America facilitated the rise of China. And today America is suffering and the world is suffering because of the United States of America. It is time for America to elect a new leadership. Let Joe Biden go home. You need a president who is crazy aggressive, a president who's willing to stare down China, a president who's willing to actually put Marines on Taiwanese soil. Unless you do that, China will not back down, because China knows whenever China has stared at people, generally, especially the West has backed down, because you depend too much on China. You must shift manufacturing from China to India. Put pressure on the Modi government. Put exceptional pressure on the Modi government. We don't care. You build factories, you build land. We don't care. We want it 24/7. There is enough land, there is enough talent in India, there are enough engineers. There is enough everything in India. We don't lack for money. We don't have anything that is lesser than China. We're building that ecosystem that China already has. We're building it very fast. And the West want to understand that you don't have time to lose. This guy, Xi Jinping, is preparing for war. And please don't think that all his threats on Taiwan are empty threats. He's just waiting for the right moment. The day he knows, again, intent and capability. I keep on repeating this like a broken record. Intent and capability. Today, China has the intent, it does not have the capability. The day China has the capability, right? Russia has already said, the president of Belarus, he's already said that if you support the Russian and Belarusian, if you support this bloc, we'll give you nuclear weapons. And in spite of our best relationship with Russia, who do you think Russia supports in the long run? Russia supports China, which is a cause of concern for India also. Because whatever weapons India buys from Russia, China already has the technology. Russia is dependent upon China. If Russia decides to give half a dozen countries nuclear weapons and they all join the Chinese bloc, and already in the Chinese bloc are Pakistan, whatever Pakistanis might say, they are in the Chinese bloc, and North Koreans. You'll have 10 odd countries with nuclear weapons all in the Chinese bloc. And America is again caught up in this democratic decency and rights and this and that. China doesn't care about human rights. China only cares about the rise of China. Terrible though it may sound, but these are global realities. The next news that I will cover is that, according to reports of the government, the Indian economy, the growth has accelerated to 6.1 in the March quarter. This is just for one quarter. And they also say that the full year growth estimate was revised to 7.2% from an earlier 7%. And overall, if you look at the overall 21-22, India's economy grew 9.1%. So, we have already discussed that Germany has gone into recession, and there are 75% chances, according to the Bloomberg report, 75% chances of UK going into recession. And there are 0% chances of India going into recession. So we must understand a couple of things here, right? That India is doing phenomenally well. Now, there are problems, of course. There are problems. India has problems, and India is a very, very large country. By some estimates, the most populous nation on earth. I think we've overtaken China in terms of population. But we have serious problems, and all of us are working together, including the government, the people. We are working to overcome these problems. And these numbers show that we have been largely successful. It's a long haul. India is not going to become an economic superpower tomorrow. It may take more than a decade, but we will get there because our fundamentals are correct and we are going in the right direction. But what we need is more manufacturing in India. What we need is more spend on research and development. We need the factories of China to shift to India. Let me be very candid about this. There is no other way of saying it. The factories in China, the European and American factories which are in China, have to shift to India. I've said this to the Americans and I've said this to the Europeans, and I'll say it 100 times more. Both America and the European Union are responsible for the creation of this monster called China. It is you who created this monster called China. Now, India is outperforming China in economy, in terms of global headwinds. In spite of global headwinds, India is doing phenomenally well. And all parameters say that India will continue to do well. But the Europeans and the Americans must put their money where the mouth is. Yes, you'll have a few challenges when you come to India, because our ecosystem is not like the ecosystem in China, because the ecosystem in China is government controlled. It is a laboratory environment. But if you don't want to be attacked by China tomorrow, if you don't want to be pressurized into submission by China tomorrow, China is already doing that. And we covered this in the last news item that I mentioned just now, 2 minutes back. You have to invest in India. You have to believe in the India story. You have to get your factories out. You have to get your Mercedes, your BMWs, your Audis, your Volvos, your hundreds of automobile factories that you have positioned in China, you have to get them out of China. You have to get your mobile phone factories in India. You have to get your automobile factories, your electronic manufacturing. All these big brands like Philips and all. What in God's name are you doing in China? You should be here in India. And across India, chief ministers of various states are just waiting. They're saying, you tell us what you want in terms of taxation, in terms of land, in terms of approvals, in terms of a single window policy, in terms of monetary help. What do you want? Tell us. India is ready. India is waiting. The only power on earth that can stop China, and let me be very honest with you, because we share a border with China, therefore I'm saying this. It's impossible for the United States to fly all the way 10,000 kilometers and fight China. It's impossible for Europe to fly 8,000 kilometers and fight China. You can never do it because your country is there and Chinese are here. There is only one country which can fight China, only one country on earth, and that country is India. We don't want you to help us by giving us weapons and ammunition that we'll buy from you. We don't want your troops. We have the best and the finest army in the world. We can take care of China. But you need to invest in India. You need to weaken China. And how will you weaken China? You will weaken China by realizing what is China's strength. Chinese strength is their economy, not their military. Not right now. It will be China's strength in the future. 10 years from now, the military will be China's biggest strength. But today, China's biggest strength is its economy. When we talk about the economy, what are the two factors that makes China strong? Intellectual property theft that they've stolen from you guys, you Europeans and Americans. They've stolen your patents. And number two, contract manufacturing, because you keep on opening factories in China, because you think it's cheap. You keep on opening factories in China, you keep on inaugurating factories in China, Tesla this, Apple that, Mercedes, BMWs, Audis, Volvos. You name a brand and it's in China. Why? Don't you know what Xi Jinping is saying? Don't you know it's coming to bite you in the back? Don't you realize what China wants to do? Don't you realize that you have no ideological compatibility with China at all? Don't you realize that you're a democracy and they are a pure evil dictatorship? The only way you can fight China is to get out of China. The rest, the Indian Armed Forces will handle. So, ladies and gentlemen, the last news that I'm going to cover today is PM Shehbaz Sharif has decided to attend Turkish President Erdogan's inauguration ceremony. I don't even understand why Shehbaz Sharif wastes his time, Prince Charles becomes King Charles and this guy wants to go to Britain to attend the ceremony. I don't know why. What have you got to do with... You could have very well sent the president, or you could have, if you don't like, I know you don't like your president, Arif Alvi very much, you could have sent the speaker of the National Assembly, you could have sent the foreign minister of Pakistan, Bilawal Bhutto, or you could have even sent the deputy foreign minister, but you decided to go yourself. Today, Shehbaz Sharif is going to Turkey. He's saying that I want to go to Turkey to attend the inauguration. Why? If you keep on going to somebody's place time and again, you will lose respect. Please avoid going. Please stop saying they are our Muslim brothers. You have no brothers. Pakistanis, I want you to understand this and take this from a well-meaning neighbor. I mean, you might have all your suspicions about me, that I'm not well-meaning, but actually I am. And let me give you this piece of free advice. There is nothing called Muslim Brotherhood. I'm not talking about the terror organization. I'm talking about the concept. There is nothing called Ummah. This is a great fraud played upon you by your rulers, that a nation will support you because they are Muslims. This is fake. This is fraudulence on the part of Pakistani rulers. They might give you arms. They might consider you beggars and give you aid. But they don't treat you like equals. You don't have any respect in those countries because you refuse to stand on your 2 feet and you keep on playing the religion card over and over again just because you want money. Now, you're paying the default card in Pakistan. Oh, we have defaulted, and yet you're not defaulting. And every month, at least 4 times, which is once every week, one Pakistani minister will say that, we are nearing default, we are nearing default. And you're taking money from the world, threatening the world with default, but you're not defaulting. Had you been on the edge of default, you would have defaulted by now, but you're not defaulting. Because your default is still very far away, and you know that. And you know why the world is so afraid that the world will keep on supporting you. That is what I'm saying. Please don't. Why do you want to go? Why? You see, this whole emotional thing about, you are not being emotional. I'm talking about the Pakistani rulers. The Pakistani public is emotional. The Pakistani public is emotional about Turkey because some nonsensical Turkish dramas you have seen about Ertugrul Ghazi or some nonsense like that. That's fake. That's absolutely fake. The reality is the Pakistani rupee is 315 to a US dollar. That is the reality. Not Ertugrul Ghazi, that idiot wearing those funny fancy dress clothes and waving around swords riding horseback. That is not your reality. The reality is that your economy is down in the dumps. The reality is that you're diplomatically isolated. Why in God's name do you want to go to Turkey? You should be in Pakistan. You should ensure that your country stands on its 2 feet. You should ensure that the fundamentals of your economy are better taken care of. But you find it, I guess, easier to beg. Who'll do all that work on the economy? It's too tough. Working on the economy is terrible. Just beg. It's far easier. Extremely disappointed in Pakistan and in Shehbaz Sharif. Extremely disappointed. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, I hope you liked this video. If you did, please press the like button. Subscribe to our channel and don't forget to press the bell icon. Jai Hind, Vande Mataram, Bharat Mata Ki Jai.